All right, are we streaming? We're streaming. Hey there. I'm going to do a little something different today. Not a lesson technically, although there'll probably be stuff we learn in all of this. Uh, but I've got a kind of a busy day today, and so I don't want to go too long. And I've been really kind of slammed, and I've got to do a bunch of stuff today. So. One thing I'm doing is I'm working on a new movie. I don't know what it's called. You know, when I get the tracks, there's usually some kind of initial or something. Oh, that's right. Oh, dang it! I'm not wearing green anywhere. I think I'm part Irish too. So I don't. I forgot it was. I don't have anything with green in it. I really don't. I probably should get. March is usually pretty cool, so maybe I should get a sweatshirt that says "Hi, I'm Irish" or something that's green. Sorry about that. I apologize. It's pretty pathetic, but happy St. Patrick's Day. Um, I'm trying to create a controversial thing to talk about. Rick Beato does this a lot, where when he does his live streams, he doesn't necessarily even have a guitar in his hand. He just talks. I'll probably pick up a guitar because I can't help myself. But it's one of those things where, you know, I want to do. I actually may do a video on this, and do more and more research. You know, and this kind of thing is more just conjecture. But I have an answer to this question that I believe is about 99% certain. I may end up contradicting myself in this. Here's my Starbucks cup right here. I should probably, right next to the Elixir strings thing, I should probably put a little Starbucks logo as well, huh? Yeah, I wish I could get them to pay. I do use Elixir strings on pretty much all of my guitars. The only thing that's a challenge that and I think actually, and I'll show you this. I think, let's see, there's so many different types of Elixir strings now. They got the Polyweb was like the original, and then it was the NanoWeb, and then it was the OptiWeb or something like that. I think I have. What guitar was I doing? Bowing, and so with the coated strings, you can't bow. They won't bow. If I pulled up an acoustic guitar like this guitar here, the bottom strings, nothing, because they're coated in Gore-Tex. So it resists that friction, which is part of the reason why I like it, because they're quieter when you go up and down the fretboard. But the top string, if I can get an E string here. Yeah. I can totally do it on the top two strings because they're not coated. So I need to experiment. I think so. Maybe if they make, I know they make the OptiWeb for electric. I don't know if they make it for acoustic. Let me look. I'll pull up. Do I? Okay. I'll just go to. I'll just go to Elixir. Oh no, I can't do that because it'll send me this weird portal for ordering strings. Okay. What am I looking for? So let's say Sweetwater. All right, Elixir acoustic strings. All right, so what do they say? They've got NanoWeb. NanoWeb. So maybe, I don't even think, do they even sell Polyweb anymore? No, they still sell Polyweb, Polyweb is the ones that tend to get a little bit, they're definitely a lot smoother. That's the most coating you can get. So it looks like only NanoWeb, and I think these. Let's see, on my Martin, I guarantee it's NanoWeb because I don't have the Polyweb package. I don't even recognize. So I think they got some new packaging. Okay, Holly and Dennis will be missing. Thank you, Bruce. Appreciate that. Good thing we have Bob here. Okay, let me close this window. So anyway, the Polyweb thing is the most Gore-Tex, and then so OptiWeb. I don't know if they're planning on doing OptiWeb. I could ask them on Twitter and see if they reply, or on X or whatever. The thing is, I think OptiWeb, I think it may allow a bow to work. So if they made OptiWeb acoustic strings, then, but part of the thing I like about the Polywebs and the Gore-Tex coating is it's quieter. We're not moving my hand across the fretboard. So we'll see what happens there. Okay, so I'll get to this quote unquote. It feels bright in here. Let me show. There we go. I'll get to the question at hand, and I think I worded it how I wanted to be worded. Would the Beatles be famous if Sgt. Pepper's was their first record? So my belief is they would not. We would never have heard of the Beatles if their first record was Sgt. Pepper's. I don't know if that's particularly controversial or not. And basically, it's amazing how much the Beatles, and I'm a big Beatles fan and a Beatlephile, but it's amazing how many how many what was I going to say? Sorry, I got sidetracked. But there's when they came on the scene, I was going to say, it's amazing how in such a short amount of time they created so much music. But even more impressive was how they evolved and how quickly they evolved. I mean, their first couple records, and I'm going to pull it up right now just so I have the Wikipedia page. Where is it? Right here. Of their releases, so I can kind of get them in the right order. Because Meet the Beatles was first, and that was pretty much about half covers, right? So they weren't really writing. They were kind of a cover band, to be honest. And that's a whole nother discussion about how did the Beatles get so famous? And they basically part of it was because Elvis had gone into the army, and Frank Sinatra was getting old. It was like Buddy Holly died in a plane crash. So, there was this kind of void in American music. But let's look at their first couple albums, and a good chunk of the songs on their first couple albums. Yeah, it was largely young females, exactly. And it was there again. I could go into this why they became so famous, and those reasons weren't some of the stuff was still true when Pepper came out in 67? Pepper came out in 67. So, okay, Please Please Me was the first release that was in England. We got Meet the Beatles. And let's see if the same songs are, what the track listing is. Let's see. I Saw Her Standing There was on that. So there were 1, 2, 3, 4, they got 7 originals. Well, a lot of originals. In fact, it's all originals. No, Twist and Shout is. I'm sorry, lead vocals. I'm looking at the wrong thing. Okay. Uh, yeah. So you have 6 of the 14 songs were covers, and that's because that's what they were doing. That was their, largely their audience, was coming to see them. They were a cover band, and they cut their teeth doing that. And then eventually they got, more known for their writing. But initially, I mean, I Saw Her Standing There, I think is a great pop song. I just love the changes. It's the changes betray the fact that they knew music. Close. Was it close your eyes? I mean, it literally, it's F sharp minor, so we're in the key of, we're technically kind of in the key of A and kind of in the key of E. It kind of goes both ways. Again, part of their brilliance. They weren't going to be locked into a tonal center. But it starts out with a 2-5-1 and it starts out with 2-5-1 in the key of E. F sharp minor to B7 to E, and then it goes to the 6th chord, which is pretty common. Now I think about like Breezin'. It's 1, 6, 2, 5. 2-5-1s are very common in jazz. The most common chord change in jazz is a 2-5-1. And then it goes to A. So it goes to the 4 to the 2 to the flat 7 major, so D, and then to the B, the 5 chord. So it breaks the rules. It's literally the opening cut of their first record. Then Misery, which I didn't realize Misery was their song. Anna's not. That's Arthur Alexander, whoever that is. Chains was written by Carole King. Isn't that amazing? Carole King's got a song on the first. And I knew this, but it's just amazing to me. And then Twist and Shout is Bill Medley and Burt Russell. No, Phil Medley, sorry. And then Mac David Williams, Burt Bacharach wrote Baby It's You. Yeah, I knew that was a Burt Bacharach. So that was before Burt was working with what's his name. So, but Love Me Do's on there. Love Me Do, I think, is their first single. If I'm not mistaken, somebody's probably saying that right here. But they started out. They got their audience playing music that already existed, or music that was adjacent musically, harmonically, instrumentally to music that was already popular, i.e. pop. So I Saw Her Standing There and Chains and Anna and Boys. I mean, I'm assuming those were hits. I don't remember anybody else doing those songs, but I know they were. Let's see. A Taste of Honey was definitely a hit for other people. Twist and Shout was definitely a hit for other people. So that's their first record. And so they started out by basically doing, and George Martin was kind of probably doing some culling there, as all good producers do. They go, well, this is a good tune, but this one's not. Either work on that some more, or we'll just throw it away. It'd be interesting to hear some of the songs they threw away, but early on they really didn't throw away much. There's a lot of recordings later, but they were working quick. I think they recorded this album in 2 days. And Twist and Shout, there was records that come out with all the versions of it. Twist and Shout, you can hear John's vocal cords practically bleeding at that point. But and then with the Beatles, which is the one I think of as their first record, but in England it was their second record, and then we called it Meet the Beatles, kind of the same cover, and then so if they may actually have the Beatles album discography, let's see, being single. Yeah, let's see if they have a separate one for U.S. releases. Because, yeah, they don't. I mean, okay, here we go. Original U.S. albums. Introducing the Beatles. Oh, really? I thought Meet the Beatles. Oh, that one. I do have that one. That's right. Introducing the Beatles. So that one had, I do have this one. I have them all. I saw her standing there, Misery. Okay, so this is the same. Basically, it's 2 songs less. There's still 6 covers, so it's missing a couple of the originals. 1450 on one side, but the average song length is 250. 148, 3 minutes is the longest one I see here. 204, 225. I mean, typical for pop songs of the time. And the typical song form was AABA. And the A would be a verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus kind of thing. And that was kind of how songs laid out back in the day. They kind of still lay out that way a little bit, but we don't call it AABA anymore. Oh, that Taylor is not the one that was given to me. This one was given to me by Bob Taylor. So, yeah, this Taylor was given to me. I've had this since '97. Nicest thing that ever came in the mail. But I was teaching clinics for Taylor guitars in the late '90s, and so they wanted me to have a new and a nice Taylor. I didn't even have I didn't have a Taylor at the time, but that one is the 814. The 20th anniversary one that you're thinking of, Bruce, is the one that my cousin Kenton gave me. All right, so yeah, so the Beatles album discography, and then Meet the Beatles, then Beatles' second album, which is funny because it's technically their third album, and at least in the U.S. Hard Day's Night, Something New, Beatles 65. I don't think I had Something New or Beatles 65. There was another release that I had that came out yesterday and today, I think, that had a lot of the songs on there. The Beatles 6, it's, I could go song by song and kind of start to point out their development, but it wasn't really until I feel like Rubber Soul. I mean, they were always experimenting with harmony. The Help is a good example. What's the guitar riff? It's what? It's like, I think is what they did, and it's like, how? And that was a hit. But again, by then, now that one might have still been a hit if it was their first song. But by then they had license with their audience. Sorry, I gotta loosen my bow. They had license with their audience, and this is my point. This is my overall point. I want to get rid of this window. There we go. Okay. By the time Sgt. Pepper came out, okay, I'm going back to my where is it? Here, this window. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 albums, including Rubber Soul and Revolver. And there's definitely, like Please Please Me with the Beatles, Hard Day's Night, Beatles for Sale, Help. They all are kind of in that pop model, AABA. They kind of have the love songs, the themes. You could look at the themes and go, there might have been some hidden meanings in there with Lennon especially, but for the most part, it was about love or sex. A lot of that stuff was sex stuff that they were kind of sneaking in there. They were being schoolboys, and particularly Liverpudlian schoolboys. But so that's a lot. That's 8 records before Sgt. Pepper came out, and so they had a ton of credibility. They had a huge fan base, and what happens is this Sgt. Pepper's, and I'm going to pull up the playlist. There's some weird tracks on there. The whole record starts out weird, with the audience, and you've got, this kind of rock and a short song, and it ends with Billy Shears and goes into Billy Shears, and then it's right into the hold on a second, I gotta pull these up. There we go. Sergeant Pepper. Wow. Gotta get to the track listing. Here we go. Okay. Yeah, with a little help from my friends, which is also interesting. Sergeant Pepper's, the title track is only 2 minutes long, and then it goes into a Ringo Starr track that's almost 3 minutes long. And then Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is 3:28. There's nothing particularly long except Within and Without You, which is 5 minutes, Harrison track, which I really like that song, but it's not, it's not pop at all. Even When I'm 64 is vaudevillian. It's a throwback. And keep in mind, there's always those throwbacks. When I was you guys remember, when we were in school in the 70s, the 50s were real big. So we would always have 50s Day every, like in the first couple of weeks of school in the fall, there'd be 50s Day. And you'd have actual kids would show up with cigarettes rolled up in their white t-shirt sleeves and their denim jeans, and the girls would show up in the poodle skirts and they'd put their hair back and ponytails and all that stuff. And it was a big thing. And there were songs that came out that kind of are reminiscent of the, of the 50s. Queen had a song that was very 50s in the 70s. So that was kind of, and then TV shows, and movies like American what's the name of that? It was filmed right around where I live too. American Graffiti, and TV shows like Happy Days and stuff like that. So and then of course you flash forward 10 years and you get a TV show called The Wonder Years. It's about the 80s, and growing up in the Wonder Years is about growing up in the 60s. I don't know. I forget. I never watched Wonder Years, but it's always been that kind of thing where you would do those throwbacks to 20 years. I think of the song in the 60s, Winchester Cathedral, bah, 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 bah. It's like my least favorite song. Beth knows that. So whenever she wants to get on my nerves, she'll start singing that. I've got plenty I can sing to her. That's worse for her because then she starts singing it subconsciously. She can't help herself. But the thing is that my point is that this record was kind of odd. I mean, Lucy in the Sky, Getting Better, Fixing a Hole, She's Leaving Home, Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite. People bought this record that were Beatles fans that had bought the 7 records before. Did I say 7 records before? And they might not have gotten it. They might have went, ooh, I don't think anybody threw it away. And, back in the day, they would release a single first. I'm not sure if a single came out before. Well, does anybody remember if there was a single off of Sgt. Pepper's that came out before the record did? Because that's definitely a ploy to get people to buy a record. And I mean a ploy because sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. I mean, how many records did we buy? Particularly, I bought a ton of records in the 80s. To be honest, it was part of the reason that Napster got so much traction. I mean, other than people just don't want to spend money. But there were so many records in the 80s, I'm talking to you, the Tubes, that put out records that were pretty much awful but had one good song in it. But you didn't know that. You heard the single, you go, oh man, I love that song. And you get to go to the record store and they've got a sticker on it featuring the song, Talk to You Later. And you're like, oh, that's awesome. I'm going to buy this record. And you realize, oh, there's only 2 songs on this whole record that were produced by, David Foster and featuring Toto. And so, the rest of the record was pretty much worthless, in my opinion. I'm sure there are fans. Yes, Bob, the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper was considered psychedelic, which is funny because I know they smoked weed. Well, they started to do some psychedelics and stuff like that, so there was some contribution to that. But, The Summer of Love was 67. What was the release date on this record? It came out, having a hard time scrolling through my windows here. Release date. Internet died. Okay, looks like I'm back. Sorry, buffering. I don't know what happened there. Probably because I'm talking about copyrighted stuff or something. I don't know. No singles from ahead of the LP. Thank you. Strawberry Fields had come out just before. So the new style, that's right. And Strawberry Fields was out before. Yep, it's done now though, I think, Sam. So yeah, no, I know. I actually talked to Lukather about that solo. Richard, I love that solo, and I talked to Steve Lukather about it, and I said, dude, that's a great solo. And he goes, man, I want to do that one again because that was great, but the last note was I bent it sharp. And I went, oh, really? I never noticed that. He goes, yeah, and I wanted to redo it, and they were screaming in the studio like I just, they were going, yeah. And I said, I want to do another take, and they said, no, because back then it was tape. And if he was going to do another take, he'd have to erase that take. So they didn't do another take. Release date 6/1. Okay, maybe because it says on Wikipedia that it was 6/26, basically the same time. But it was technically before the Summer of Love. Not that the Summer of Love hadn't already started in San Francisco, a couple years before. But Haight-Ashbury, probably you could trace some of that stuff back further. But yeah, so the new style was kind of expected. But again, and there's a whole system, a whole process of how this record came about. But my conjecture is if this were their first record, we would have never heard of the Beatles. If Sgt. Pepper's was their first record, say if Strawberry Fields Forever was their first single, for one thing, if it's their first record, then they didn't do Revolver. Which I can't remember, is it Revolver or was it Rubber Soul that inspired Pet Sounds? And then Pet Sounds kind of inspired Sgt. Pepper's. There was a little bit of a rivalry there. Yeah, you were graduating. Isn't that amazing? That's when you graduate high school. Yeah, it's just crazy, First off, how fast time goes. I mean, that's a lot of years ago. And I'm right behind you, my friend. But, so if the Beatles' first record was Sgt. Pepper's, there would be no, it wouldn't have happened. But there would be no Pet Sounds, which kind of inspired Sgt. Pepper's. And so, the internet does not want me to talk about this. Holy cow. I don't know what the lag time is. Yeah, I'm back. Yeah, it's pretty quick, actually, Sam. Literally, because I have a little box down here in the bottom of OBS, the software I'm using, and it just went red. Just like shut off. It went from 2,800 kilobytes a second to 0. And then it went yellow and still had 0, which is weird. Yellow should be like 400 or something. But it was yellow and then it went. So I don't have anything that is really chewing up. It's definitely at somewhere else. It's happening the internet somewhere. My technical description. So the Beatles bought a lot of I'm just gonna say patience. Okay, so many Beatle fans when they got Beatle fans when they got Rubber Soul, they were kind of like, what's this? But then they listened to it again because they had credibility with their audience. And so they could use that credibility. Now, I don't think we'd know who the Beatles really were if Sgt. Pepper's was their second record. Like Meet the Beatles or With the Beatles was their first record. and then Sgt. Pepper came out, was their second record, I think they would have been one-hit wonders. I mean, it would have been, that's a tougher one because they were so famous with that first record. I mean, at one point when that first record came out, I think they had 7 songs in the top 20 in the U.S. You mad? No, all 10 songs in the top 20 in the U.S. I think 7 in the top 10 or something crazy like that. I want to do a video. I want to talk about that too because America was ripe for this to happen with the Kennedy assassination just a few months before. You know, it was, but the Beatles were very unique in a lot of ways too. So even though there were covers, they did it their own way. They had 3 singers, technically 4 singers. You know, most bands had 1 singer. So you wouldn't get bored of someone's voice. You know, there might be, you know, if you were a Queen fan, you might, well, I don't know, Queen. Did Freddie Mercury sing every Queen song? I guess he did. I always think Rick Ocasek sang every Cars song, but he didn't. Some of their biggest ballads were sung by the other guy. I can't remember his name, but so I think, you know, those are some of the factors that they had this versatility. They played their own instruments. They wrote their own songs. So many bands of that time, particularly bands after that, like the Monkees and things like that, that just became manufactured bands. They didn't really, you know, they weren't as connected to their music as the Beatles were. And, you know, now another thing I could talk about, maybe a separate thing, is there's going to be a Beatles movie. But they're kind of in the process of, they don't have a script yet, but Sam Mendes, I think, is option 4 Beatles movies. He's going to do the Beatles story, which in my opinion can pretty much end with John's assassination. You don't need to go beyond that. You know, if John hadn't been assassinated, you could stop after they broke up after Abbey Road. You know, if they were all still alive, I don't know that you'd need to continue, but it would be important to kind of see how the other Beatles found out, and it would be interesting to see how they found out and how they reacted to John's murder. But the way that Sam Mendes is doing it is 4 movies for each of the different perspectives. So start with their childhood, and they each had different upbringings and things like that. Ringo Starr was a very, very sickly kid. I mean, I think did he spend 6 months in the hospital at one point? It's amazing how like healthy he is now. I have several friends that play in his band, and he's a vegan, and he's like skinny, and is 84 years old and still like jumping around on stage and playing drums and everything. So it's pretty amazing. Roger Taylor. Yeah, Benjamin Orr. Thank you, Bob Schumann. He sang a lot. Yeah. And Roger Taylor did sing some, didn't he? Or did he wrote, Roger Taylor was the one that wrote the Friends song that Queen did. I can't think of it. But anyway, probably Queen's most popish song. But for example, like I'm a big Radiohead fan, and Radiohead doesn't like their first album really, and they hate Creep, and they rarely play it live. I mean, you could go to 100 Radiohead shows and they won't do Creep. When they do Creep, it's very rare. Exactly, Joseph. But that first record was fairly accessible, which was probably part of the reason why they don't like it. And so, you know, when the Bends came out, which is, I think, a pretty accessible album, you know, that had two pretty big songs on it. I think Fake Plastic Trees, which is a great song. I mean, I love the Bends. For me, it's a really good record. My favorite is OK Computer. When that one came out, I remember going to I think I went to Best Buy. I bought it, and me and Alex was just a little kid. Well, he was like 7 or something, and we sat in the parking lot and listened to that whole thing. We just listened to the whole record, and we just kind of went. Our jaws dropped. There was so much going on, and it was so much stuff that was weird. I'm like, whoa, what the heck was that? A lot of moments like that, if that had been the first record that came out, they might not have gotten any radio play. Not that they really get a lot of radio play, but K-Rock was playing. Actually, a couple stations were playing this stuff, but K-Rock here in Los Angeles was playing Creep, and I think Fake Plastic Trees. There was another song that they played. I can't remember. Best Friend. Yeah, John Deacon. You're right. Yeah, Best Friend. That's probably their most like popish, accessible song. Thanks, 6ix9ine. Did Roger Taylor sing 6ix9ine? Is that right? Oh, Brian May sings too. Okay. Did he sing lead though? I mean, I know they sing backgrounds. But Queen was post-Beatles, and Beatles kind of rewrote the mold on that. I mean, the Beach Boys were pre-Beatles though, and Beach Boys had multiple singers. So there was some of that had already hit at that point. But that was one of the things I think that allowed the Beatles to be successful. I think that you could probably make arguments about their mixes too, and the song selection, and the fact that they did some covers. I couldn't. I'm not a big Beach Boys fan, so I couldn't tell you if they did covers on their early records. They might have done songs like by Jan and Dean or something like that, but I don't remember. But yeah, so, but Sgt. Pepper's, this record, the cover alone. The fact that they're pretending to be another band, that's another thing that would totally have confused. It's like, wait a minute, are they Sgt. Pepper's? Is the album called The Beatles? What the heck is The Beatles, If that was was all there. And of course, you see right there, everybody thought that was a P for Paul, like a tombstone or whatever. That's actually a guitar made out of flowers. Just actually, it's a bass, I think, made out of flowers. It's got strings, I don't know. I actually, my brother-in-law knows one of the people in the drawing. Let's see, it's Richard Belk. Richard, what's his name? The Lenny Bruce is there. Stockhausen's there. W.C. Fields. Aleister Crowley, the head of the Church of Satan. I mean, they just that was probably John's pick. He would be the one that would want to kind of do that little, like Carl Jung. Edgar Allan Poe. Fred Astaire is up there, right? Mae West. Oh, Richard Merkin. That's who it is. And I think he is, let me zoom in on this. He's in the back. I think he's the one with the red hat. That might be Richard Merkin. Next to Fred Astaire. Yeah, that's right. It's in order. So who's next on this list? So they're going back row first. The Vargas Girl. The original Vargas. That's an old Vargas Girl. Huntz Hall. Huntz Hall was one of the Bowery Boys, a group of actors that starred in a long series of films in his 30s to the 50s. He's probably remembered for portraying Crabface in 1938. Angels with Dirty Faces. Yeah, so it's interesting. The people that they chose to be up there was a lot read into that. It was, and a lot of them are just cardboard cutouts, and some of them are actual, they got from Madame Tussauds, right? Isn't that Muhammad Ali and Marilyn Monroe? Right? Is that right? Is that Marilyn Monroe at the bottom? Anyway, so the let me go back here. I want to get this screen dark again. Yeah, so I think it would have. I think the Beatles probably would have ended their careers would have ended with this album. This would have been their only record, and nobody would have bought it, and that would have been it. And there were some bands like that. There were bands that kind of came out with, but not too many. It was kind of a big deal to make a record back then, and bands like the Beatles financed so many new artists. There were so many new artists signed because labels were, because EMI and Capitol were flush with cash, they could sign everybody. And they signed a lot of British bands. I mean, the Stones, but the Stones were kind of almost simultaneous in some ways. They just had a totally different appeal. And they're an example of one singer basically. I mean, Keith sings almost everything. And if you don't like Keith's voice, you're probably not going to be a Stones fan. But if you don't like John Lennon's voice, you can still like the Beatles. You can like all the Paul McCartney songs and the George Harrison songs or whatever. Yeah, I could think of several controversial videos to do on the Beatles. Was George Harrison the best songwriter in the Beatles? I've kind of almost come to that conclusion. However, George went to college and studied songwriting with Lennon McCartney. So, he got to sit next to the best at the time. But did he ultimately become a better songwriter? Looking at post-Beatles stuff, I'd have to do a really good study on that. I feel like Paul developed a little bit more. I don't feel like John developed a whole lot. John took time off. John became a family man. He only had about 10 years of a career after the Beatles. Double Fantasy was a good record. There was nothing groundbreaking on it. Yeah, I would agree with that, Joseph. I don't feel like John developed much. I think George Harrison developed a lot and kind of created his own style. That was kind of sneaking out during the Beatles, but I always think of him as kind of being buddies with, Monty Python and that sound. So, but yeah, I think this record would have been a one-off. The same exact thing would be true if the Beach Boys' first release was Pet Sounds. You'd never have heard it. It would have sold 10 copies. And I guarantee you, there were a lot of Beatle fans that listened to this record and went, "What? This is a weird record," Bob, do you remember the first time you heard this record? Did you like it? Did you get it, or did it take? Because here's the thing: you with success, you buy patience from your audience to because the audience, it's a great record. See, this is kind of why I'm using this as an example, is because literally it's often called the greatest rock record of all time. I mean, if I go to the top 100 rock records of all time, it's either one or two. It's the greatest rock, and it's kind of undisputed that it's, if not the greatest, one of the greatest. And yeah, that's also true, Joseph. Okay, yeah, Jimi Hendrix, and rock was coming around, and they weren't really rock. And Hendrix and rock, and you had the Stones, which were a little bit more rocky, and who else was? Well, the Cream was definitely rock. They were kind of taking it to another level. But again, Hendrix, Cream, even the Stones to some point, all have careers largely because of the popularity of the Beatles, and we saw this, for example, when Nirvana got big. What was that, 90? Was that 91 when Nirvana came out? I mean, what was the album called? I can't remember the album. But yes, exactly. Sgt. Pepper's was still kind of poppy. It was still very popular. Well, especially songs like When I'm 64 and those songs were very, very much had their feet firmly planted in pop music and love songs, happy love songs, and all of that. White Album, they started to bring in the rock, and they started to get more serious with their lyrics, talking more social issues, right? And yet with Sgt. Pepper's, again, hold on, I'm going to pull up the. Okay, whatever. I see. Interesting. Okay. Little Help from My Friends. Yeah, pop. Sgt. Pepper's one. It kind of starts with rock. It's kind of distorted guitars. Lucy in the Sky Diamonds is kind of a hippie song. Getting Better is very poppy. That's a McCartney song. Pretty much whoever sings it is the writer for the most part, especially at this point. Early on, it was definitely collabs, 50-50 or 40-60. By this point, it was almost 100-0 or 90-10. Day in the Life was one that was Lennon wrote, but then Paul wrote the B section. So Lovely Rita, When I'm 64, Good Morning. Not Good Morning, Good Morning wasn't, John was kind of writing for the benefit of Mr. Kite was an interesting song, but it wasn't, it was a little on the poppy side. But yeah, I mean, can see if you're into Hendrix and Cream and Clapton and even the Yardbirds and stuff like that, the Beatles would be, oh, that's, 15-year-old girls records, But there were a heck of a lot of 15-year-old girls that bought their Beatle records. And here's the thing, Beatlemania, you're right, Beatlemania started in England, obviously, and it spread over here. But when did it spread? My grandmother went to England in '63 and brought back a single. My cousin still has it, a Beatles song, and I don't know what song it was. I should text her and ask her which one was it. I think it might have been "Please Please Me" or something. And she was saying she bought it for her grandkids because she thought these guys are really popular in England and they're kind of fun, And she was like an old lady and she got it. That was when I was working with Justin Bieber, and I haven't worked with him in a while. I think 2020 was the last time I worked with him. 2021 maybe. When was it? Yeah, 21. But basically most of his records, all of his songs, could be liked by 7-year-olds and 77-year-olds. They were unoffensive. He didn't do a lot of cussing or anything like that. I think that's going to change in his next record. I'm not hearing anything, but I just have a feeling he's gonna come out, swinging, and so we'll see. But I feel like Beatles were pretty easy for all generations to like. And Sgt. Pepper wasn't any different than that. Sgt. Pepper was almost even more so because you had songs that were throwbacks to music that was popular when the 50 and 60 and 70-year-olds were young at the time the record came out. So there was it was a lot of bridges that Paul McCartney in particular was building, and in some ways probably smartly building his audience. And so, building the band's audience, thinking in those terms. He definitely of the four Beatles was the most pop-centric, most aware of pop. But also a lot of the experimental stuff came from Paul. I've talked about this probably before, but the Beatles, their accountants told them to buy houses out in the country to get out of paying the 90% tax, that they were getting killed in taxes. And something about, I guess if they bought a house or something, they wouldn't have to pay tax on that money. So they were all buying estates out in the country. But Paul didn't. He was still living with the Asher family. I talked to Peter about this. I met Peter. I did a gig with Peter, and I asked him about some of this stuff. And the Asher family, because he just loved the energy of London. And he would go to art galleries and music, weird music stuff. And meanwhile, John was out, in the country getting bored, and so was George and Ringo. I mean, they were all pretty, and then they would go and meet. Paul bought a house. He still has it. I think he still lives there, just around the corner from Abbey Road. I've not been to the house. I've been outside the house. I saw it. I didn't take a picture of it, though. I should have taken a picture of it. But went to Abbey Road and then walked, and you could walk to Abbey Road from this house that Paul has. And there was an attic in the house, and they would go up there. They would all meet, come from the country, and they would meet and start working through songs for the next record. And then they'd go at Abbey Road and start cutting records. And that was kind of the that was kind of the process at that point. But Paul was the one that was still in there. He was the one that heard about backwards tapes and cutting tapes up and creating the calliope sound that's in, I forget what song is the calliope sound thing. No, Blackbird was definitely inspired by Bach. You're right. Yeah, Blackbird. Yeah, it's a great. I mean, that alone is weird. Okay, he's going G, basically A minor, G over B, and you think, well, you're going to go to C, right? You're going to go to C. That makes complete sense. It's up. I taught this song wrong for so many years. Finger right hand wise, you know, it's like that's what do they do? I am a leprechaun. I did that kind of thing. I did like a Travis pattern kind of there. Whereas, you know, he kind of did what John Mayer does, you know. I used it in that song for Justin, Raise the Bar. I used that kind of groove from that. But yeah, it goes G, A minor, G over B to G. It was like... It's like, well, that's not a song. It's like, what the... And then it did that. It just... sorry, I'm not... I mean, it's freaking brilliant. It's just brilliant. Yeah, so that's White Album. That's after Sgt. Pepper's. But the you know, the patience that they had purchased with their audience by kind of giving them what they wanted. You know, they were cutting. You know, I think their music was pretty complex. And that was the other thing. I mean, again, there's so many things. I could make a long list of why the Beatles succeeded. George Martin obviously was a huge, you know, he was the fifth Beatle. Oh, well, you know, there's a lot of people that claim, you know, Pete Best wasn't the fifth. Billy Preston, no, Billy Preston wasn't the fifth Beatle. George Martin was the fifth Beatle. And George facilitated a lot of this stuff. And I think in some ways, because George's history, and I've read All You Need Is Ears, which is his autobiography. It's a good book. The first third it's the middle third, it's about the Beatles. And then the first third and the third are just, you know, about him. So I was mostly interested in the middle third. I've read the middle third a few times of that book. But he was one that was, you know, I think a lot of times inspired the complexity of some of their songs, you know, was because they were like, oh yeah, well, we could try this. And I've told you the story about with Paul wanted the strings to do on Yesterday, and George said, no, that's a bad note. You know, it was on the why is it what? Something like that. The strings did like this dominant seventh thing. They did like a dominant seventh on the one chord. And George Martin was saying, well, that's a wrong note. In the book, he talks about this. He says, that's a wrong note. And Paul's like, no, that's the note I hear. And George is like, but you're wrong. Musically, you know, theoretically, it's not correct. And Paul said, you know, it was kind of like, I don't care. Have him play it. And afterwards, after he heard it, it was like, yeah, Paul was right. It wasn't like 20 years later he realized Paul was right at the moment. Like Paul's sensibility, his melodic sensibility was very classical, very classical. May 12th, 67. So yeah, Yep. Yeah, that's right, Bob. Yeah, I totally get that. And especially since you graduated high school there, you were 18. You know, if you were 13 in 67, you might have thought, oh man, my sisters really love the Beatles. I love the Beatles. That's where I was. So when this record came out, I was 6 years old. I was born in 61. So, and my sister, of course, got it. My older sister got it. And I didn't buy my first record that I owned myself. It was Help, and it was disappointing because I'd saved up all this money. I got a quarter a week allowance. It took me a year to save up $5, and I got help, and it was half soundtrack, and the songs were interspersed. It wasn't like you could just listen to side A and get the pop songs and ignore the score. No, they put the score in between the pop songs, and it was like lift a needle up, and this was so frustrating. And it was like I felt betrayed, but I still love the Beatles. Oh yeah, I guess I could see that. Yeah, the Borean E minor. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I also like. Um, the, yeah, I mean, definitely I hear, you know, Bach in Paul McCartney's writing for sure. Not in George or John's, but definitely in Paul's. Um, so, but here's the argument against my argument. My argument is that I think if Sgt. Pepper's was the Beatles' first record, they would have sold 10 units and they would have been dropped by their record label. Never would have been a second record. Nobody would have ever heard of them. And you could probably find bands like that came out with really weird records for their first record. Maybe a band that was inspired by Sgt. Pepper's said, okay, what would the Beatles do 10 records from now? And there is definitely such a thing as being ahead of your time to a fault. And there are a lot of artists, I feel like, that were ahead of their time, and they really didn't get credit where credit was due, right? Okay, but here's the argument against my argument. My argument is that we would never have heard of them if this was their first record. The argument against that is that their talent was so good, it ultimately couldn't be denied. And so, but I only give that a 1% chance. And the reason is because ultimately in the record business, it's the music business, right? In the Christian music business, it's Christian music business. That's the joke we have. But in the music business, is music business. And while bands like the Beatles, I think Michael Jackson did it for Epic. I think so many artists got signed because Michael Jackson made so much money for Epic Records that they were able to sign. I was talking about Nirvana. So the thing that record companies kind of tend to do also, like Nirvana gets big out of the blue. Like, what the heck happened there? And they weren't expecting it at all. If you watch the movie Sound City is where they talk about that, I think. I don't know if they talk about that record, but it just, the studio was dying. And when studio's a piece of garbage still to this day. But when they recorded Nirvana, the studio was about to go out of business, and when that record came out, it was a huge smash. Everybody wanted to record there, and all the labels went to Seattle and signed everybody. Pearl Jam and Soundgarden, and Hole, and all of these bands. They just signed everybody, and some of them were good bands, some of them were really not very good bands. But it was kind of like you got this signing frenzy going. I think the same thing happened like early, in the early 70s, maybe in Chicago, because like Styx, and then you had like REO Speedwagon. I think the Cars were from Boston, and there were a few bands from Boston, Aerosmith, things like that. The record companies would go, it was almost difficult to get signed in Los Angeles, the record capital of the world. You'd literally right around the corner from Capitol Records with a stack of records, and you'd be playing clubs there, and there would be no executives from record companies there. They were all in Seattle, signing. But then in the 80s, there were a lot of hair bands signed out of it. So like Motley Crue and, Great White, or all those bands, that got signed in the 80s that were kind of MTV bands. Guns N' Roses, a lot of that happened in LA. And so that was the same thing. A lot of those bands got signed in signing for, Twisted Sister and stuff. I'm not sure how many of those bands were, originally from LA, not necessarily, but a lot of bands started coming to LA. right around the time I did. I mean, I moved to LA in January of '83, because it was where everything was happening. And it still is. I mean, there's a big shift going on. There's a lot of lost, um, uh, you know, businesses here that have, you know, been greatly diminished. The film scoring business is way down here, which is part of the thing I came out here to do. I'm actually working on a couple films right now, remotely. Um, and I can't say what they are. The one I'm working, I don't even know what it is. One of them I don't know what it's called because it's all the, it's just initials for stuff. So, yep, Your Mother Should Know is actually really, I always like Your Mother Should Know, and that's from, uh, not Yellow Submarine. The TV show they did, that hour-long special that was awful. Sorry. Oh, it's right here. I keep forgetting I got the list of albums. Let's see. Albums. Yeah, Revolver. Somebody's jumped on it. Magical Mystery Tour, thank you. I was just talking to somebody about that. I called a friend of mine who's a big Beatlephile to ask him what he thought of the Sam Mendes thing. Now, they might have it cast, but the longer they go with casting, they're going to have to recast because if the actors get old. But they haven't written the scripts yet. There's 4 scripts. I would love to be part of that. I think you could do that by committee, to be honest. I think you could do it almost like how sitcoms are written with a room full of people. But feature film script writing is usually a solo endeavor, a solitary endeavor. I thought Peter Jackson should have done a 3-parter, and that's what I would have done. I would have done the first movie, kind of their childhoods and their meeting and Cavern Club and everything up to Beatlemania, and then do a second movie that's Beatlemania, and like touring, and then the Philippines is part of the reason why they stopped touring because they almost died in the Philippines, and so that would be the second all the way to when they stopped touring, and then the third movie would be all the Abbey Road stuff. And I thought Peter Jackson would be perfect for that. January 1947. I'm sorry. Oh yeah, you guys are all old compared to me. I'm just messing with you. But yeah, and again, the Beatles. So it's really, really, really hard to come to this conclusion because, again, the Beatles contributed so much to how much music changed, and the fact that Yardbirds got signed, and then Cream became a thing, and then Zeppelin became a thing, and Hendrix, hanging out in London, he got big when he was in England, less so here, and then he came back, kind of thing. So, what year was Woodstock? Was that was '69, right? I mean, I have a friend. That I know, Abe Jr., Abe Laboriel Jr. I think I've met the guitar player for Paul. I mean, it's so funny because my stepbrother, his girlfriend that passed away a couple of years ago, she's Australian, and she dated Paul McCartney like back in the early '70s or something. She was Miss Australia, and they dated. I had a girlfriend that lived in Keith Moon's house in Malibu when John Lennon was there after he kind of took a break from Yoko, and she said John was just a complete a-hole, but she said it was because he was really missing Yoko. Like they had fought. He came to California with May, and the girl May that was the other girl, and and then he left. But this girl I knew, she was living in that house. She was kind of a groupie. I don't know that we were ever girlfriend, boyfriend. We dated a little bit. She was 10 years older than me. I met her when I was 18. She was 27. So, and all of her stories were true. I mean, she introduced me to a lot of musicians. I didn't realize, she's passed away, but I didn't realize at the time she was a drug runner. Because she looked like Farrah Fawcett. She was adorable. But she would bring in suitcases of marijuana from Hawaii, and they wouldn't even check her bags. She just got away with it. It's like, I had no idea. I didn't do drugs. I've never tried marijuana. I'm afraid I might like it. That's why I've never tried it. Same reason I've never gone to Hawaii. I'm afraid that would be every vacation from now on. Yeah, times were different then, for sure, Bob. Yeah, sorry. Oh, he did. Okay, yeah. And that makes sense. I believe that. Yeah, I'm not wearing green. Sorry. I don't even have anything green. I think these are more yellow. These pics sometimes look green in the right light, but the fluorescent green. Dang, I'm going long. I wanted to go short, but that's okay. I like talking about this. My thoughts aren't very organized on this, but my premise is that we would have never heard the Beatles if Sgt. Pepper's were the first record, their first record. But because they did all that pop stuff, all their fans gave this record the second, third, fourth, or fifth listen to finally get it, and then they understood what the Beatles were going for. They saw that. And the Beatles are the greatest example of changing and growing. I talk about, and I talk about Bieber a lot, but it's just because it's the biggest artist that I've ever worked with, and I worked for him for a good period of his career, and people would send me songs. Can you get this to Justin? And I would listen to it, and it would sound like it would sound like Baby. I'm like, did you listen to his last two records? Because nothing sounds like this. He's never going to do that song again. And the Beatles were exactly that. I mean, I think you can, I can hear, like I said, I think their first record's really good. I think, introducing the Beatles, and I Saw Her Standing There, such a great song. Love Me Do's good. Do You Want to Know a Secret? Is that, listen, who wrote it, though? Who wrote Do You Want to Know a Secret? It doesn't say. Basically, I think I Saw Her Standing. Love Me Do. Yeah, man, it's okay. P.S. I Love You is formulaic, I think. But so and it was mostly covers. You go to their second album, Introducing the Beatles, right? Oh no, that was Introducing the Beatles. I'm on the U.S. thing. Okay. So the second album, okay, go wait. All right, Meet the Beatles, and then that, I Want to Hold Your Hand. I Saw Her Standing There. So that's on both records, right? Did I just see? She was just 17. Paul still does that one. Paul still does that. But this is the first record I know of. I think of the Beatles' first record as Meet the Beatles. I Want to Hold Your Hand. I Saw Her Standing There. I Want to Hold Your Hand is great. This Boy, not bad. It Won't Be Long. Let's see. All I've got. I think a really good song is Not a Second Time. I really like Robert Palmer's cover of that. Not a second. Yeah, the songs on Meet the Beatles are freaking brilliant in my opinion. I think it's a really good record. The Beatles' second record, I thought was kind of a little bit of a sophomore slump, and I think it was songs that they hadn't released, and there were more covers on it again. You had Chuck Berry and Smokey Robinson and Richard, you had Berry Gordy. Money is a Berry Gordy song, probably not, but Brian Holland, Please Mr. Postman, Long Tall Side. So they didn't have as many songs ready to go, and so the original songs were I Call Your Name, Thank You Girl, You Can't Do That, She Loves You is probably the biggest song from that, and that was the whole yeah 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 thing, and so that really got people going. And then after that was Hard Day's Night was a movie. So then they came out with a movie, and on that record, I think there were score songs, right? Track listing. No, all versions. Hard Day's Night, but I should have known better. Hard Day's Night's a great song. I like I'm Happy Just to Dance With You. Can't Buy Me Love, phenomenal song. And I love her. Not a great pop song, great ballad. Anytime at All. I'll Cry Instead. Things We Said Today, I don't remember that one. When I Get Home, Can't Do That. A lot of the Lennon tracks ended up on the B-side. I'll Be Back. These are probably all singles, to be honest. It's probably the first side was songs from the movie, and then the second one was... Because, again, these are the American releases. This is how we got them. And then after Hard Day's Night was Something New, which I didn't really... get that record. I don't know why. I didn't buy it. I'll Cry Instead, Things We Said Today, Anytime at All. These are songs. Okay, so these are songs that. See, my version of Hard Day's Night, I think, had score on it. I don't think it was all songs. This one I never had, but it has I'm Happy Just to Dance With, Love You. So a lot of redundancy. Slow Down, which is a cover. And Matchbox, which is a cover. Again, kind of releasing the covers, trying to fill up albums, keeping records coming, because that was one of the things they did. Beatles 65. That's kind of gets, 65 gets, again, this is a year, this is their, how many records are we into now? Introducing the Beatles, Meet the Beatles. Let's get rid of Meet the Beatles. Get rid of Introducing the Beatles. Meet the Beatles, January 64, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 records, and December of 64. In 1 year, they did those 5 records. So there's a lot of filler in there. There's songs that didn't really they weren't singles. They just put them out. They weren't great Beatles songs. I've seen that. Have you seen that list where it's like the Beatles songs in order of best to worst kind of thing? And it's really fascinating. I mean, 340 songs, or I forget how many there are, and it's. I kind of agree with a lot of it, a lot of the worst songs. Yeah, it's like, yeah, that's not a good song. It's really hard. It's very, very subjective. But Beatles 65, No Reply, I'm a Loser, Babies in Black, Rock and Roll Music, Chuck Berry cover, a Roy Lee Johnson cover, a Carl Perkins, 2 Carl Perkins covers on this. I mean, they were thanking their lucky stars for that. I'll Follow the Sun. It's okay. Babies in Black's not a bad song. I Feel Fine is actually a cool song. She's a Woman, I think, is a really good song. But I think the version I know is Jeff Beck. Jeff Beck's version of She's a Woman. Honey, yeah, I'll Be Back. Yeah, again, it's like, wow, they are just flooding the market with records. And then everything changed. With the Beatles 6, which came out in June 65. So December 64, June 65. See, prior to that, let's forget Beat the Beatles, January 64, then April. So you got January, February, March, April. So 3 months later, they come out with the Beatles' second album. 2 months later in June, they come out with A Hard Day's Night, simultaneously with a movie. So the movie promoted the record, so on and so forth. Then July 64, Something New, which had other songs on it that were previously unreleased. And this is America. Keep in mind, this is America releases, different than the British releases. Then Beatles 65, which finished the end. So they went July to December, a little bit more time to do some recording. But again, they were touring. And then they were trying to do records, and they did pretty much every song they ever recorded, with just a couple exceptions, was recorded at Abbey Road. So they had to get back to London and record. So when they did Beatles 6, they're back in the studio. And again, with the cover. They start out with Kansas City, Bad Boy by Larry Williams, and then Buddy Holly, Words of Love, which actually I really like their version of Words of Love. Dizzy Miss Lizzy, another cover song, which actually not a bad cover for them. It's probably one of their better covers. I think this is the end of the covers, though. I don't think they ever did another cover after this. Am I right or wrong? Yeah, I Want to Hold Your Hand was definitely their hook song. I Saw Her Standing There. I think was just a masterfully written song. And that was probably one of those 50-50 collabs. Both of those songs were probably 50-50. But I feel like Beatles 6 had 8 days a week. There's something going on there. There's a development there. I thought it was a very good song. It was a single. It did pretty well. I Don't Want to Spoil the Party. Kind of a throwback to their You Like Me Too Much. Not a great song, but that's an early Harrison song. What did it do? Charts, weekly charts. Belgium, Canada, U.S. Yeah, so 8 days a week hit #1. Not a big surprise. If, you know, it had been 6 months the record came out. They had some time. I Don't Want to Spoil the Party. What You're Doing. Yes, it is. Tell me, yeah, every little thing. Not their best songs. I mean, now on the radio, they play everything from, like, Sgt. Pepper's forward, mostly. A lot of this early stuff you would get played on radio stations a lot back in the 70s and 80s, but it's getting less and less of that spin time. But then Rubber Soul. Then Help, which I feel like has a lot of tracks. Again, this one, my version of Help had score on it. This one has stuff that would have been on other records or that were singles. Because remember, they were releasing singles that had A and B side, and they didn't put them on albums. They had two methodologies to releasing records. So Help, really good song. Night Before, You Gotta Hide Your Love Away. I mean, sorry, come on, that's a great song. Another Girl, You're Gonna Lose That Girl, Ticket to Ride, all frickin' masterpiece pop songs with a lot of interesting things happening there. Particularly, I think a lot of the stuff that's interesting about those songs are the drum grooves. Ticket to Ride is one. You Gotta Hide Your Love Away, it's in 6/8. Help's got those weird breakdowns. Everything's kind of got a weird thing. Now, these other songs on here, Yesterday, Dizzy Miss Lizzy, those were, that was already on a record. I've Just Seen a Face. That wasn't on in the movie Help, and it was, so these are not technically Help songs. Well, no, maybe Tell Me What You See was on there. I can't remember. Act Naturally, no. And that wasn't written by them. Here's Dizzy Miss Lizzy again on this record, and Act Naturally, both covers. So they did do covers. I don't think there's any covers on it. I was thinking Rubber Soul was the next record. Rubber Soul, let's see if there are any covers. No. So, You Drive My Car, Norwegian Wood, come on. Nowhere Man. I even Think for Yourself, I think, is a pretty good George Harrison song. I think he's starting to get Michelle. I mean, it's just, yeah. And the thing about these songs is that so many of them started to get covered by jazz artists. Now, the jazz artists were just trying to sell records, but these were the first songs that they could actually do something with. They weren't covering a lot of the early stuff because it wasn't. What Goes On, not a bad song. Girl, yeah. Not bad. They say tit, 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 tit at the end of Girl, right? They're saying tit, tit, tit and laughing while they're doing it. I'm Looking Through You, I think it's a very good song. In My Life, yeah, a great song. In My Life is a really nice song. It's really, really, really nice song. Wait, I don't remember. If I Needed Someone. If I Need... Again, another George Harrison thing, and he's got one track per side. George was always bummed about that. He was very prolific during this time, so he ended up releasing some of these songs later that he wrote. Okay, so then after Rubber Soul was Yesterday and Today, but that was just an American release. That wasn't an actual sit down and record, because most of these were singles. So they just took it. Basically, you could call this kind of a compilation. Although, wasn't Drive My Car just in Rubber Soul, or am I? The thing about Rubber Soul was that there was a lot of acoustic going on. There was a lot of acoustic tracks in here. Yeah, Drive My Car's on that. So we had a double hit there. I'm like, why am I hearing this song again? I don't remember thinking that. But Dr. Robert, Nowhere Man's good. That's also on Rubber Soul. I'm Only Sleeping. just a pretty mediocre. Yesterday, my favorite Beatles song is on Yesterday. But again, it was a single. And what was the B-side on Yesterday? Act Naturally. Okay, so it was a cover that they threw on the B-side. Yeah, In My Life is a great song. Eleanor Rigby, that's coming. Yep. And Your Bird Could Sing, great song. We Can Work It Out, What Goes On, Day Tripper. Day Tripper's a phenomenal song. We Can Work It Out is a great song. I mean, And Your Bird Can Sing, We Can Work It Out, Day Tripper. You know, these are all records that were pretty much released, I think, as singles. Day Tripper was a single. What was the B-side on that? Oh, We Can Work It Out was the B-side. No, it was a double A-side is what they called it. Because they were both hits. So the personnel, yeah. So it was still just the Beatles. Although Yesterday had strings, so there was other musicians on that. Okay. And then Revolver. And Revolver, a lot of things. They added the horns. You know, they'll do the horn section, kind of a send up to the R&B songs of the past. Taxman. You know, now you've got some politics entering in. And Harrison, they opened the record with a Harrison track. I mean, that's pretty cool. It was probably, I bet he was pretty excited. In fact, it looks like he has two on that side. On side A, he has two. Love You Too is the other one, but that one I don't think is a very good song. Eleanor Rigby's on Revolver. Great record. I'm Only Sleeping, Here, There, and Everywhere. One of Paul's schlocky pop songs. What is that? C major. It's just 1, 2, 3, 4. But the thing is, I think Yesterday, I don't know if it's still true, but I think Yesterday is the most covered song of all time. So, you know, writers make money off of that. Here, There, and Everywhere was covered a lot by jazz artists. Yellow Submarine made an appearance on this. This was not, so it might have been one of those things where Yellow Submarine was released as a soundtrack. Because I remember, I got it when it came out. So my copy is really old. All of my copies are falling apart. No worries, Catherine. Good to see you. Yeah, Pepper's here. We're talking about you, Pepper. Sergeant Pepper. She said, that's okay. Good Day Sunshine, great song. Again, Paul McCartney's writing pop songs. And Your Bird Can Sing. What a great song. Really good song. I really like that song. It's just a fun song. Dr. Robert's okay. Got to Get You Into My Life, another pop horn section. You know, they did the movie Sgt. Pepper's. It was, you know, big. Who sang it in the movie? Who was it Elton John did? Earth, Wind, and Fire. Well, they did a cover of it. I don't know if it was for that movie or not, but they did a great cover of that. But yeah, I mean, so fun. Tomorrow Never Knows. So yeah, there was, you know, the songs aren't getting longer though. We're still looking at two. There's only one song that hit 3 minutes, and it was Tomorrow Never Knows, and it's exactly 3 minutes. So they're still in that kind of like pop thing. But that record inspired Pet Sounds, according to Brian Wilson. And then Pet Sounds kind of inspired this rivalry to have them go, oh, we got to do something really interesting. And, you know, that's been talked about a lot. So then we get with Sgt. Pepper's, and we're going to stop here. But this is, you know, like I said, this record, if it had been the first record released, this had been the Beatles' first record, it would have sold 10 copies. We never would have heard of them. Unless, like I said, their talent was too good to ignore, and I do think that that's the case. I also do think the Beatles, you know, the sum was great, or the total, what is it? The total is greater than the sum of its parts, or something like that. Individually, I don't think they did anything that added up to anywhere near the greatness of what the Beatles were together. And here's another question: would the Beatles have reunited if John and George hadn't died young? What do you think? Do you think the Beatles would have reunited at some point? I think they would have done some Live Aid thing or something like that. I don't know that they would have released any new material. They probably would have done just some old songs. Sgt. Pepper's has 1, 2, 3, 4 songs over 3 minutes. 2 of them over 5 minutes. Well, one's a 5:05, and that's Within You and Without You by George Harrison. And then Day in a Life, of course, which ends the record, is 5:38. And I think 38 of it is just a fade of that last chord. And they're cranking those compressors. As it fades out, they're literally turning up the compressors to get that last chord to ring out. It's really interesting. Turning up the volumes on the Fairchild compressors. So that's, yeah, so, and again, if they released this record and it was their first record, it would have had to have been a pseudo vacuum kind of thing, because the things that led to them writing these songs was part of the thing, you know, that they inspired someone to be inspired to do something they were inspired to do, blah, blah, blah. So it's hard to even imagine the Beatles releasing Sgt. Pepper first, because so many things had to happen to get to that. I kind of was just going through it all. So that's kind of my opinion on it. But anyway, I think if it was their first record, nobody would have ever heard them. They had zero credibility. They would have no credibility with their audience. And they bought, with all those records, all those hits, particularly, I mean, I'm pretty impressed with Revolver and Rubber Soul. Those are obviously 2 of their best records. They really started to develop their sound and their audience. And their audience grew up with them, you know, and it wasn't that much time. I mean, 64 to 67, those 15-year-old girls were 18 now, or whatever. Those 13-year-old girls or 13-year-old kids were 16, 17 now that first got into the Beatles. So it really wasn't that much time. But they just matured everybody. And they were doing it all while being kind of living, you know, in the bubble of Abbey Road, just recording. They had that. I've been in studio too. Hold on a second. Let's see here. Boom, boom, boom. All right, let's see here. I gotta find. Sorry, I'm photograph hunting. Weird. I know they're here. The photos kind of get mixed up in their order. Weird. Ah, here we go. I'll just grab all of them. All right. So here I am. Oops. Weird. I want it. Oh, do I have to do that? Weird. Is it too big? Is it too big of a file? I can't imagine. All right. See if I get this one. Oh, there we go. Whoa. It is a big file. Here we go. So here's, I think this is the Lady Madonna piano. Ah! See, there's the part, the floor. You recognize that floor if you've seen any pictures of Abbey Road Studio. But this is the piano, the Lady Madonna, which I actually wish I knew how to play. Let me just. Yeah, I wish I'd taken more pictures in there. We were so awestruck. Let's see, will this one go? No. Duplicate. Let me. All right, save. Let's see if I can get this to be here. Nope. Why won't you? I don't understand why it won't. Okay, let's see if I add image. Okay. All right. Browse. Sorry. So this is me playing the, see all the, somebody had been taking the keys off. I think it was probably just like as souvenirs, which is kind of sad, taking the ivory off the keys. But I don't even know what chord I'm playing. That looks like a C, looks like a C power chord, maybe C minor. I don't know. But that's, yeah, that's the Abbey Road. That's the Abbey Road. And then I think I get, so let me just make a smaller version of this so it's not so large. No, I don't want to adjust, I need to duplicate that. Now adjust the size. Anyway, I'm losing you guys because I'm fiddling around with this, but I'll add one more photo. And this lady, I'm trying to remember her name right now. She's manager of Abbey Road for years, post Beatles, but for years. And this is Alex and Jack at Abbey Road. And she gave us a whole tour of all the studios. We weren't allowed to take pictures in Studio 2. Let me see. And pretty much it's the same as it's always been. They don't really change. They didn't change much here. Why they shouldn't. One of the things she said they changed, though, what used to be in these draping curtains that were, for reflection, to cut back on reflections, were it's such a process to add a photo, for crying out loud. Unbelievable. This is really arcane software. But those those panels there to cut back on reflections, they used to originally back in the 50s and during the Beatles time, they were filled with dried seaweed. But they replaced it with something less flammable. Something inflammable. No, I'm just kidding. But that was this is back in 2014. So this is over 11 years ago. But yeah, it's I should send this photo to my friend Barton and make him think I'm in the building with him, because my friend Stephen Barton, the composer I work for doing Apex, he has a studio now at Abbey Road, so he rents a room there and that's what he uses as a studio. I'm gonna send him a photo and he's gonna be, wait, are you in the building? I'm gonna crack him up. But yeah, we got a view of Studio 2, and this is Studio 2, the Beatles. But Studio 1 is where they did all the film scores. They do, Lord of the Rings was done there, James Bond, Star Wars. It's just a great sounding room, and all the big composers, if they can use that room, they will. You know, even Barton, who co-wrote the score for the Star Wars game, 8 hours of music, they recorded there at Abbey Road years ago. So, all right. So I probably should get going. It's funny because now we're starting to get a bump here and people watching. And 26 is like the peak, and now I gotta go. But I was just talking about, and my premise is that I think that if the Beatles' first record was Abbey Road, it's a 99% chance we'd never heard of them. The 1% chance is that their talent was just too good to be denied, and that maybe if the label was smart, they'd recognize something in that. But you know, like I said, it's the music business, and if it wasn't making money, a lot of bands did one records. Most bands, records never came out. So for every record that comes out, there's probably 2 sitting on a shelf somewhere, especially back in the day. That's not really even done that way anymore. So, yeah. I think yeah, you're right, Bob. It does have a key change. Yep. And that lends itself well to jazz as well. It kind of keeps the audience from being bored. So, all right, guys, I'll talk to you later, Dick. I'll see you next Monday. And I don't know what we'll talk about, if we'll keep talking about this kind of stuff or if I'll go back to lessons. I should go back to lessons. I could go back to some beginner stuff, too. We could talk about some beginner stuff. If you have any suggestions about what you want me to talk about, put it in the Discord. There's a Discord link there. Go in there, and Bruce will let me know. Thank you, Bruce, for doing that. If Bruce sees any requests, he'll text them to me, and that way I can be prepared 1 minute before. If I see it myself, or if Bruce texts you, if you text me, you know, like a few days before, then maybe the night before I'll do some PDFs or something that we can use together. But yeah, feel free to ask. You know, a lot of times if you're struggling with something, you know, everyone else is too. Okay, so feel free to ask, and we'll work on that. I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.